The mainstream media has never been about simply reporting the facts or educating the masses. It's been about establishing a particular opinion within society that reflects the position of the political establishment. Nothing proves this more than the manner by which the Palestine-Israel conflict has been reported in the mainstream media. It's so stark that whenever we see a slightly pro-Palestinian article in the BBC, I'm personally amazed by it. And because the pro-Zionist lobby expect a slavish adherence to their narrative, they perceive this as one slightly pro-Palestinian article as a bias against them. Or worse still, they'll claim that this is suddenly an example of anti-Semitism. So when we have a report like the one done by the Center for Media Monitoring called Media Bias Gaza 2023-2024, authored by Faisal Hanif, we now have empirical researched evidence to clearly demonstrate the bias in a more objective and quantitative way. And when you see the points they raise at how biased the reporting has been, I think it will even shock you even more. From the report, they make mention certain key findings. For instance, 76% of online articles frame the conflict as a war between Israel and Hamas, while only 24% actually mention Palestinian or Palestine. This framing obviously decontextualizes the conflict, seems to indicate that the target of the attacks are primarily Hamas and that Palestinians are somehow caught in the middle of all of this. But it is pretty clear Palestinians are not simply caught in the middle between Israel and Hamas. They are in fact the intended targets of Israel. When you destroy 50% of the homes, including hospitals, bakeries, churches and mosques, when you force over 85% of the population to move, when you refer to them as human animals and impose upon them a famine by cutting off food, water, electricity, medicine, fuel, etc., it's not Hamas you are targeting, but the entirety of the people of Gaza. And that's not to mention that Israel has killed over 10,000 children, with tens of thousands of civilians either killed, wounded or missing under the rubble and presumed dead. But yet the media will call this an Israel-Hamas war, with Israel simply defending itself against Hamas attacks. They're just acting in self-defense. In fact, as the report states, television broadcasts overwhelmingly favored Israel's right to defend itself, effectively overshadowing Palestinian rights by a ratio of 5-1. And we can see the problem with framing extends to the point that the vast majority of the media output on this conflict rarely mention that Palestinians are an occupied people, and almost no mention that the occupation is illegal under even international law. In fact, Al Jazeera English mentions it more times than the combined British and international media outlets together. Laughably, the report found that some media outlets gave the impression the Palestinians were in fact occupying the West Bank. For instance, Sky News' defense analyst Philip Ingram seemed to accuse Palestinians of occupying the West Bank. We keep forgetting to talk about the West Bank, the area that is occupied by the Palestinians inside the area we have as Israel. This is crazy. And on two further occasions, Sky News claimed or implied that Golan Heights, the Syrian area occupied by Israel, was in fact in Israel. And this isn't just being stupid or misspeaking. If you deliberately omit the fact that there's an occupation, and whenever the discussion is brought up from the Palestinian side or excuses given to Israel for their massacres, it tends to be called complicated. This is a complex situation. You see, if the media presented what was actually occurring, i.e. that there were people who were originally ethnically cleansed from their homes into refugee camps, and in these small enclaves that they are currently living in, they are still being illegally occupied by Israel, and that they seek to resist this illegal occupation, then suddenly it becomes super simple. It is between the illegal occupiers and those people who are ethnically cleansed and continue to be occupied. The report also makes mention of the emotive language used. Emotive language describes Israel as victims of attacks 11 times more than Palestinians. The report also mentions an analysis of 100 random mentions of certain terms like atrocity, and it showed that the term atrocity was used for Israelis 73 times, whereas only 6 times for Palestinians. For the term massacres, it was used 77 times for Israelis and only 13 times for Palestinians. For the term slaughter, it was used 69 times for Israelis and only 14 times for Palestinians in Gaza. What this shows is emotive emotive language describing Israelis as victims or using words like massacre, atrocities, slaughter, more for them, referencing them, creates sympathy for Israelis, while at the same time it's not given to the actually occupied people living as refugees who face collective punishment. So only the Israelis are used these emotive languages that creates this sympathy, not for the Palestinians themselves. Now, people like Piers Morgan, who attempts to claim that they bring on pro-Palestinian voices, also addressed or refuted by this report, because it shows how pro-Palestinian advocates are routinely misrepresented and undermined, unlike pro-Zionist voices.
Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister, on a couple of weeks ago, I watched the interview. Your opening question was, how comfortable are you with the way Israel's prosecuting the war? Right. Bit of a softball to start with. You didn't ask him to condemn Israeli terrorism, Israeli war crimes, Israeli genocide in Gaza. So a lot of people look at that and they say, they get your intention, but it comes across as a bit of a racist double standard.
Zionists are given light touch, rarely if ever challenged, whereas pro-Palestinian voices are routinely misrepresented as supposedly supporting Hamas or supposedly supporting the genocide of the Jews, etc. The report also looks at how the media reports on pro-Palestinian marches compared to pro-Israeli ones. Often pro-Palestinian marches are presented as pro-Hamas. For example, GB News and Talk TV account for 42% of these types of references.
These marches are hate marches. A lot of the demonstrators taking to the streets are pro-Hamas. Many have issued all kinds of menacing statements.
Similarly, that pro-Palestinian marches are anti-Semitic. The BBC Politics Live presenter Joe Coburn said,
I'll show you these pictures at Liverpool Street Station. A large number, I have to say, I don't know how many, but thousands, in a sit-in at Liverpool Street Station. They're calling for a ceasefire, but many in the Jewish community, or the Jewish community maybe as a whole, feels very intimidated by this sort of crowd chanting ceasefire, or in other marches, Free Palestine. Do they go too far?
She did not, however, mention, here's the context, she did not, however, mention that the protest had been co-organised by Jewish groups who had a large banner at the station regarding Jews against genocide. But that wasn't actually filmed by the BBC. There's clear labelling by the mainstream media of pro-Palestinian marches as though they are somehow a terror threat or that they are violent, while at the same time claiming the pro-Israeli protests were peaceful protests or vigils. It's clear that reports like these show us the true face of mainstream Western media. As I said, it's not about presenting facts. This is not what the mainstream media want to do, but telling the population how to think and how to feel about a situation or event. And this is reflective of the political establishment's opinion. The solution to this is, firstly, don't just buy into mainstream narratives. Investigate further and try and understand the topic as best as you can. Ask questions. Why is the media framing this event in this way? What is the establishment seeking to gain from this? Furthermore, we need more alternative media to present alternative narratives from that which is being forced upon us. And that's one of the key reasons why we set up this channel, Political Alchemy. Inshallah, please help and support us so we can help provide a true assessment of what's going on in the world, particularly on Muslim-centric issues from Muslims themselves.